Okay, so now we're going to talk about what some of the characteristics, right? So we talk about imagistic, which is synonymous with analog, and symbolic is synonymous with propositional, right? Imagistic representations are like photographs, maps, caricatures, whereas symbolic representations are like words, numbers, or a number of variables. So some aspects of these different types of representations, imagistic representations tend to be concrete, or they are concrete, I should say, and iconic, meaning that you can see them, right, in a sense. They also tend to be distributed, right? So an image is distributed among space, and there's a spatial medium associated with that representation. They are represented through a spatial medium. And there's a point for point correspondence often, right? So if I think of a map of Mankato, there are parts of Mankato in the representation of Mankato in the map that correspond to the actual city of Mankato. And they can also be ambiguous, right? So there's some issue of fidelity, right? An imagistic representation can be ambiguous because it may not as faithfully represent the thing that it's supposed to, right? There's more variation in how well it can represent that referent. Uh, okay. And then there's the symbolic or propositional digital representations, and these will be abstract, right? And they usually have a learned meaning to them, right? You can't just see them and know what they are. They mean something only because we've learned that that's what that means. Yeah, we've learned that meaning because other people have um, um, given that meaning to that thing, and we're just learning that meaning. And they also tend to be, or they are discrete representations, right? Um, Meaning they can be, they're either one thing or not, right? And rather than sort of a continuous fashion, right? So either it's represented or not is what I should say. The referent is either represented or it's not. Whereas with imagistic, you can sort of half represent something, or you can less faithfully represent something. Symbolic representations have no spatial medium, unlike imagistic. And of course, they have no point for point correspondence. It wouldn't really even make sense to say that they have no point for point correspondence because they're not images, right? Um, and they're unambiguous. So it means this. So the dollar sign means money. That's just what it means. There's no like ambiguity about it. It's not like it kind of means money. It means money, right? Yeah. So let's see. Computers. Actually, I think the next one is, yeah. So computers represent things digitally and symbolically using binary code, right? So uh, with a collection of ones and zeros to represent various concepts. Um, and true to the computer analogy, the mind was also thought to represent things in a symbolic way. So the idea is, well, computers use symbols. If minds are like computers, then minds also use symbols. So yeah, computers represent things with propositions. They use propositional representations that are abstract and symbolic, focusing on uh, the relationships between concepts rather than resembling the concepts directly, like an imagistic way would, right? So, an imagistic way, they could resemble the concepts more directly, but with symbolic or propositional representations, the concepts do not resemble sorry, the representations do not resemble the concepts as directly, right? Of course, at the lowest level, computers represent raw data using a binary system of ones and zeros. This means that all data, such as text, images, or sounds, are ultimately broken down into sequences of ones and zeros. However, at a higher level, computers use symbolic structures to represent more complex information like concepts, relationships, and instructions, right? Um, these symbolic structures are the propositional representations that essentially provide some sort of meaningful organization in that these propositions can be used to apply rules, make inferences, and execute tasks. Um, it should be noted that although computers can translate data into visual output, such as an image or a video, it never actually represents the image in an imagistic kind of way. So rather, it uses symbolic propositions to control the screen's pixels in rendering the image. So the computer represents the image propositionally and stores it in binary code, which but we perceive the data as continuous and in an imagistic form because the display presents it as a grid of colors and lights that our brain interprets as a coherent picture. So as I mentioned during the lecture on first wave cognitive science, it was assumed that humans only represent things propositionally also, like that's the only way they represent things. This makes some sense given that we use language and math, which are very symbolic, and use symbolic representations. But as we'll see in this lecture, this assumption was challenged by research, I think primarily from cognitive psychology. And so now we'll discuss some evidence that sentences are indeed stored as propositions. And then we'll talk about the great imagery debate. And we'll start with that in the next video.